How's it
What's going
going,
on,
Shane?
Tim? I think we said that at the same time. What's going on,
Oh
Tim?
shit, Shane, you're muted again.
He's coming in extremely choppy on my end, so he's not muted. He's having his own issue. Shane, you have to leave and come back.
Yeah, I'll leave.
Great start to the show, guys. Welcome to
Yeah.
Inside the Ice. I'm making a surprise guest appearance. I don't know anything about hockey right now, but hey, here we are. Tim, take it away.
So we got a big episode tonight. We have James Duthie coming in at 8:40 Eastern time. Do a little.
Now, who is James Duthie?
He's a broadcaster for TSN, which is one of the major networks in Canada, and he's probably in the top 5 for most popular commentators. He does NHL games. He does World Juniors. He's been to the Olympics. He just released a handful of, and that's one of the things that we're going to be discussing is he just released a book called Beauty, which is 57 like behind the scenes stories that no one else knows besides hockey players and people involved in the NHL.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. So I guess you guys are talking about our special guest that we have on later, aren't you, Tim?
Oh yeah, you're pretty pumped up with that one, aren't you?
I'm pumped that I reeled that one in for sure. But yeah, as Tim was saying, James Duthie from TSN Canada will be on this show in about 35 minutes time to let us know about we'll interview him about his new book, which I guess you just said, Tim, is an absolute must read, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can read it probably in a solid 2 days if you just stick to it. Once you get into it, it flies right by.
Man, like I lost track of time. I just sat down the other day on like Tuesday and I just read and like I lost track of time. One time I looked at my clock and it was 11 a.m. Read the book for a bit and looked up, it was 3:30, and I was like, my God, I've been reading for 4.5 hours. But it's just one of those books that you just, you get so into, and the detail in the book is so great, I guess. Like
Yeah.
I could picture everything that was going on in the book in my mind.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those great books. You guys definitely have to check it out. We'll have more on that later when James comes on with us, but we got some news to talk about.
Yeah, we have the World Juniors starting Christmas Day, which is a big tournament going on. And then even NHL news that just happened a few hours ago. Where do you even want to start this episode?
Oh, there was a bunch of NHL news that came out today. It was actually a really, really busy day in the National Hockey League media-wise today. Let's kind of start with older news and work our way to the most recent news. So, older news. I know, Tim, you and I were talking about this. Vancouver Canucks have been trapped in a little bit of a controversy here between their goaltender, their newly acquired goaltender, Braden Holtby, and, get this, their logo. What are your thoughts on this, Tim? I mean, the logo, I think, is just absolutely ludicrous. Like, I don't know why they're even being pressured to change this logo. But Braden Holtby, obviously, the goaltender for the Vancouver Canucks, he had Indigenous artwork on his helmet that he put in honor of his friend that passed away, and he was told to remove it. So he removed it. He apologized. He removed it. But now Vancouver Canucks are facing their logo, quote unquote, cultural appreciation or inappropriation or something like that, based on their orca logo. Now, what are your thoughts on this, Tim?
This just fucking annoys the shit out of me. I don't understand what an orca has to do with anything. I understand that an orca was very important to the indigenous people of that region, but you can't just claim rights to an animal because it was important to your culture. Luckily, Vancouver, I guess they've had so many different logos in their history that it's not going to be the biggest deal for them to choose another logo. And the funny part about this is a Canuck isn't even an orca. So to what extent do the Canucks stand up and say we're not going to change our logo, and to what extent do they say screw it, going to go back to an old school logo? And for me, I feel like it's all about if they were to donate money or give some money to it, it would all go away.
Yeah, I mean, between like this whole conversation thing that's going on, actually, I was reading up on a little bit of news today. It sounds like Vancouver is not going to be changing their logo. As far as it goes with, there's an Indigenous professor from the University of Manitoba that is like leading this movement to have this logo changed. But there are so many, like I was just reading on the news today, there are so many Indigenous chiefs and leaders, not only from British Columbia but around Canada, that have the Canucks support, stating, like, I'm totally fine with this logo. You go ahead and keep it. So, I mean, personally, I don't think anything is going to happen with the Canucks. But I mean, it is 2020, and anything, I guess, it's a lot more politically correct world, I guess, is what I'm going for. And because of that, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Canucks change their logo, but I don't see them doing it.
And the way that I look at it, the fact that the Canucks are using that animal as their logo because they know that the people from that region were like heavily attached to it isn't a sign of disrespect to me. I feel like they're paying honor to that like heritage, you know?
Right, and that kind of leads us into the next topic, like where you said it's like indigenous to the region. Chicago Blackhawks now, a lot of people are saying, oh, like if Braden Holtby had to remove this indigenous artwork from his helmet, and the Canucks are being forced to change their logo, the Blackhawks are surely going to be next. Um, Blackhawks actually released a statement today that said they're aware of everything going on with the Canucks, and the team president of the Blackhawks said they still are committed to keeping their name, their logo, and their brand the way they are because they've been an original six hockey team. I agree 100%. The reasoning for why they're named Chicago Blackhawks, I mean, the history is just absolute. Like it's there. The reason why they named it is because of Chief Blackhawk, who was native to the Illinois region. I mean, you read up on the history of the Blackhawks, it would just be devastating for me to have, with a team with that much history, an original six NHL club, to just go around and change their name and logo.
Yeah, and I feel like that would have such an impact on the NHL. And to what extent do we say enough is enough? Like, are we gonna erase all of history? You know?
Yeah, I mean, uh, that's just it, right? Like, I mean, Kansas City Chiefs, like, where are they going to fall on this spectrum too? My guess is nowhere because the Chiefs are probably one of the most popular teams in the NFL. But I mean, if you go out and you change the Redskins, you change the Canucks, you change Edmonton Eskimos, a CFL team, Edmonton Eskimos in the Canadian Football League has to change their name, so they're now Edmonton Football Team. You go ahead and change Chicago Blackhawks, Kansas City Chiefs, all those names. Like, you're gonna have to really start kind of monitoring, like, you know, like, how do you even pick a new name from that with all the history that's gone on?
And we're seeing right now the Redskins that are now the Washington Football Team. How long are they just going to be called the football team? Like, what are we going to do?
I think the team actually came out and said like they're committed to using the football team brand next year, even, which I think is just atrocious. Like a team with no name. But yeah, that's just it, right? Like, how long are these teams going to be stuck with no name? Like Washington Football Team, Edmonton Football Team, Cleveland Indians is another one that just had to change their name. But that one's a little bit different. They're not going to be Cleveland Baseball Team. They're going to keep the Cleveland Indians for next season, and then the season after that, look into a name change. But I mean, it's just, when you have all these teams that have all these history, like the Redskins had so much history, the Indians had so much history, and now all that history is thrown in the garbage to be more politically correct. I mean, I understand why they're doing it, but at the same time, I don't understand because you have all this history, like I said, that's just being thrown away and starting fresh.
And you're seeing different teams. It's and then other teams. It's just they need to completely get rid of the logo and the name. Mm-hmm. So, like, what you say? All right, we can keep it the Chicago Blackhawks, but what, their logo is going to be a fucking helicopter now?
Yeah, a big C. Well, you can't even do a big C because that's Calgary's logo. But yeah, pretty much. So yeah, moving on, I guess, with news here. Another big story that came out that was breaking news earlier this afternoon. Henrik Lundqvist, newly acquired goaltender of the Washington Capitals, will miss the 2020-2021 season. with a heart condition. That is just absolutely brutal news for the Capitals, especially when you get rid of your franchise goaltender this year in free agency. Like, how do you think Henrik not being able to play this season is going to affect the Caps?
I think that's going to affect the Caps a lot because, yeah, they have that young goalie Samsonov that's showing a lot of promise. But still, like, he's young. Lundqvist would have been the perfect, like,
Mentor
backup
for him.
behind
Yeah.
him to, like, show him the way. And, like, just looking at Lundqvist right now, he's 38 years old, going to be 39 in March. So he's not playing this year. If he comes back the following season, he's going to be going on 40. At what point is he just going to be done? Like, this is not a good age to just say, oh, I'm going to take a year off,
Well, and
right now, which sucks.
And that's just it. Like you said, like this season's probably going to go well into the summer. By the time you're looking at next season, it's going to be October, November. By the time that starts, he'll be almost 40 by then, like you said. So that's just it. At what point do you say, I'm just going to not come back? My heart condition is more important than hockey. I'm going to be retired, which I personally am going to predict it's going to be. I don't see Henrik Lundqvist coming back to the NHL personally.
No.
As much as that hurts to say, because like King Henrik, one of the best goaltenders to ever play the game. I know Henrik himself did come out in the press conference today and say, he is committed to making a full return. He wants to chase that Stanley Cup that he's been chasing his whole career, which I do understand. But I mean, if you have a heart condition that keeps you out of hockey, that's bigger than hockey, in my opinion. That's your health that you're messing around with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it also, what chance do you think Washington is going to win the cup this year? It's
that's just it. Yeah.
You went to like a team like Tampa Bay or like a team that's going to be like Colorado. Like, what's the chances of him actually winning a cup in Washington? And it sucks because, yeah, he was probably the best goalie in the league for many years, and he never won the cup. And he was the backbone to the Rangers for so long. He made it to the finals once, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the Washington Capitals now versus their 2018 Stanley Cup winning team. It's a completely different team. You got, maybe not half, but at least a quarter of the guys from that 2018 team are now no longer with the Capitals. You've still got John Carlson, Ovechkin, Oshie. They can all put up big numbers, but the Capitals, just plain and simply, aren't the same team they were in 2018. So I didn't see them winning the cup even with Henrik Lundqvist. But it's kind of unfortunate for me because what I had envisioned in my head was Henrik Lundqvist signs. He was signed to a 1-year deal in Washington. I saw him maybe signing a 2 or 3 year deal, playing till he's like 41, 42 maybe, and even if he's not a starter, being that backup goalie, and then Washington stacking their team for the next few years to try to get Henrik a cup before he retires. That's kind of what I envisioned. I don't see that happening now with Lundqvist being out. But it's just a brutal, unfortunate situation for the Capitals. I know the Caps fans were so excited to see him. They're so excited to have him in Washington, and it's a brutal situation for sure.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for Lundqvist, but at the same time, the NHL is a business, so the Caps are gonna fill his spot.
Yeah, I mean, who do the Caps even have other than Ilya Samsonov? Like, who's their backup goaltender now that Samsonov isn't there? I have to go out on a limb and say Phoenix Copley.
Yeah, it's no one worth noting. It's Samsonov's net now. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's just. To be honest, I think it was Samsonov's net anyways. I think Samsonov would have been, maybe not full time, but at least somewhat of a permanent starter for the Capitals this year. But it would have been. I think he would have had that much more success under the wing of Lundqvist, and Lundqvist would have been there on the bench. He's seen it all. He's been in the league long enough. He could be the perfect mentor for Samsonov, who is probably going to be the Caps, full-time starting goalie starting this year now. But I mean, Samsonov's got big shoes to fill. I mean, he's filling in for Holtby, who is no longer there, and he's got even bigger shoes to fill now that Lundqvist isn't there. So I mean, this kid, he can prove he can do it. Like last year, he came in when he needed to, and he made some big saves. He had some awesome games. He's proved he can do it. So it's just a matter of him getting back into the groove. And I think if he can kind of play to the caliber he was last year, I think Capitals will be fine.
I just want to make it clear to everybody that's commenting right now. I am completely sidetracked with a side project, and I am sorry that I missed all of your comments. So real quick, guys, we're going to run through all the comments I just missed. So we got Tim with, when does the NHL start?
The date, January 13th, as of right now, with a 56-game schedule.
Yep.
All right. Heather says hi.
Hey, Heather.
Martin says it's sad that Vancouver is being pressured to change their logo. Hobie having to change his goalie helmet is wrong. I mean, the helmet is to remember his friend. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Where do you see Chara going?
I see him getting another one-year deal with Boston. I don't see him going anywhere else because he's not expensive at all.
Will Chicago have to change their logo?
No.
I'm expecting it, but they're not going to.
They're not going to. The president came out and said that, they're committed to keeping their brand and their name and their logo strong since they're an Original Six franchise. So I don't see it happening either.
This one.
Yeah, that's a good topic. We can talk about that for a bit. Lindblom is cancer-free. I know it kind of resurfaced in the news recently, but he's actually been cancer-free for a year. A few days ago was his 1-year anniversary of being cancer-free. He came back in the NHL towards the end of last year and played with the Flyers a bit, but that is absolutely great to see for Oscar Lindblom, and that's an inspirational story right there.
And he's young too, if I'm not mistaken.
23 or 24, I think.
He's 24.
Yeah.
He's just a couple months older than me. That's insane. He's a key piece to the Philadelphia Flyers, which I think this year is going to be in the top 4 or 5 in the entire NHL.
Oh, Philly is going to be a good team. Yeah, like they have Alain Vigneault, who is the coach, who is a great coach to say the least. And then you've got guys like Giroux, Voracek, Gostisbehere, Provorov. They're not going anywhere. They're all still with the Flyers. They did what they had to do in free agency. They didn't lose anyone big. So yeah, I see Philadelphia being a really, really good team this year as well.
Absolutely. And they got a solid young goalie too, like you said. But that division is heavily contested now with the realignment.
Yeah, I know. To be honest, I can't remember what the realignment looks like outside of the Canadian division. But I mean, like who's in Philadelphia's division? Do you have that off the top of your head?
It's Boston, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Washington, Philly, New Jersey, New York Islanders, and New York Rangers.
See, now that is interesting because one of the teams that I think could kind of be a dark horse in that division is Buffalo. And I'll tell you why. Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall, bang.
And no one knows what to expect. Everybody's expecting Taylor Hall to go to Buffalo and make Buffalo even worse than they are because that's what he normally does to teams. But for some reason, I have this feeling that him and Jack Eichel are going to click, and Buffalo could be heavily mistaken a lot of teams,
And you look at the Buffalo power play, they got guys like Eichel, Hall, they'll have Ristolainen on the blue line or Dahlin, one of the two, maybe both. And then they'll have guys like Jeff Skinner, Connor Sheary. All those guys can put the puck in the net. So you're looking at a Buffalo Sabres power play who adds Taylor Hall, makes them that much more lethal because we all know Taylor Hall can score when given the opportunity. So the Sabres are definitely going to be a team that, is not to be taken lightly for sure. Sandra says, why does Red Wings have a mascot as an octopus? Where in the heck did they come up with that idea? That I'm not actually sure. Do you know the reason for that? I know it's a squid. It's a squid, I think, not an octopus. But
so that's, I want to say back in like the 50s when it was still the original 6, there was a Stanley Cup game and it was in Detroit and some fan just decided to throw like a squid on the ice for God knows why. And the Red Wings ended up winning the game. So for some reason that became a tradition in Detroit. Whenever there was a home game, especially playoff games or Stanley Cup playoff games, they'd throw a squid on the ice. And I want to say that's why the logo, their mascot is that, because of that tradition in Detroit. If you watch a playoff game in Detroit, right before the puck drop, you'll see one of like the girls that shovel the ice and shit. They'll go onto the ice and shovel a squid off because someone had thrown one on.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. I totally forgot about like Detroit and the whole squid thing there. But yeah, that. I mean, that definitely makes sense for sure. So Tim, another thing, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but it came out in the NHL. It was released about maybe 3-4 hours ago. Florida Panthers signed Anthony Duclair to a 1-year deal, $1.7 million. Do you think that's a good pickup for the Panthers, or what do you think there?
I think that's a solid pickup for the Panthers because Anthony Duclair is a great forward, and for 1 year, 1.7 million, I don't think you can go wrong because he got over 25 goals last year.
COVID to do less travel, yeah. Heather asked just now, why are they changing divisions? Yeah, definitely. I guess that was the answer. COVID.
I read online today that Fauci, the doctor and head of all the COVID stuff in the States, released a statement with Bettman saying that he suggested to Bettman that the NHL should do bubbles for the regular season. So if they do these 4 realignment divisions, expect for them to do 4 bubbles, and that Canadian bubble being in the States.
That's what I was just reading on. I wanted to touch on that too before we get James on here. But another thing that came out too is the Canadian teams, like if the Canadian division doesn't go through, because right now the Canada-US border is closed. It still remains closed. It remains closed for the foreseeable future. So the NHL has to, obviously adapt to that change and that border closure. So because of that, they were looking at this all Canadian division so that the Canadian teams, and then just have interdivision play so that the Canadian teams just play each other, 5-6 times a year in a 56 game schedule, and they never have to leave the country. But now, as Tim just said, if this Canadian division isn't, because it's still not set in stone yet, so if it doesn't go through, because they still need to get the permission of all the health authorities in each province. So British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba, they all need to get approval from their health authorities to have these NHL teams from different provinces come in and play games in their province. Now, if they don't get that approval, these Canadian teams are going to be forced to play out of the US somewhere, which, to be quite honest, I don't know if, all the players that play on the Canadian teams, they have families and lives and homes and everything up in Canada. So being down in the States where you can't leave the country for the remainder of the season, being away from your family for 3-4 months, everyone knows the players hated that when they were in the bubble in Edmonton for 2 months. So that's just kind of, where I kind of am wondering, are the players going to even go for that?
And the thing is like you said, the bubble for the playoffs is 2 months, and people were complaining about how tough it was towards the end and how they didn't like it. You're going to tell players, yeah, we're going to do a 56 game season in a bubble. And
yeah,
how quick can you physically do that without wearing the players out? You can't play more than 3 games a week, 4 games a week max. Like, you got to practice in there. You have to train in there. How quick is this season even going to be over? It's going to go into June, I'm expecting, at least, before the playoffs.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, they have to do something like kind of what the Toronto Blue Jays are doing, or not the Blue Jays, the Raptors. The Raptors are playing out of Tampa, I believe. But is there even enough cities that, if the Oilers had to play out of an arena in the U.S., they're not going to play out of a city that already has an NHL team. So is there enough arenas that would be able to each house one of 7 Canadian NHL teams? Like, I'm thinking maybe like Houston would maybe have one in where the Houston Rockets play. But other than that, it's just something that the NHL is going to be another hurdle the NHL will have to deal with.
And the thing is nothing is set in stone right now, and January 13th is going to come pretty fast.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other news in the NHL, Tim?
What do you mean?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I guess January 13th is the start date. It's temporary start date, I guess. It's not confirmed. Do you think the Anaheim Ducks captain is going to be traded? I heard there was a rumor about that. Yes, I heard about that too. Did you hear about that with Getzlaf?
No, I did not. What? where the teams.
It sounds like Getzlaf wants out.
I don't blame them. Anaheim is in no position to even contend for another cup, let alone make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean Getzlaf, he was on the Ducks when they won the cup in
Yeah.
2007, right? Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean he already has a cup, but he's up there in age too. He's got to be like 36, 37 years old. I've heard he wants out and just wants to sign like a 1-year deal with a cup contending team because he wants to win that cup again, that second cup to his name. I did hear about that, and it sounds like the Ducks are exploring options to get him traded because his contract's not up yet, so there have to be a trade, or Ducks would buy out his contract, one or the other. But I did hear about that, so it'd be interesting to see like kind of what happens with that. Now, with that being said, what team he might go to the Pittsburgh Penguins? Yes, I heard Pittsburgh, Colorado, and I heard Toronto, but I don't see how Toronto can afford him.
No, Toronto can't even afford the players they have now. But
They can't afford a hockey puck for practices.
but like imagine Getzlaf going to Colorado. That
Yeah.
team is already, I think, probably the favorite to win the cup right now. And then they get him. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean Colorado is. I mean, you know the guys on the Avalanche want to win a cup. Nathan McKinnon, he made it known numerous times that he wants to win a cup in Colorado. He has taken. Like he could have got paid probably well over $10 million his last deal, but he took a lower deal so that Joe Sakic would have more salary cap space to sign good players to play around him. And it sounds like McKinnon is willing to do that again as long as it brings a cup to Colorado. So if you bring in a guy like Ryan Getzlaf, who is like up there in age, so he's not worth a whole lot, you could probably get him on your team for $2 million at the most, I would say.
Yeah.
You bring in a guy like that to the Colorado Avalanche who has that experience. He's won a Stanley Cup 13 years ago, and he's been to the playoffs lots of times. I mean, that could be the icing on the cake there for an already stacked Avalanche team.
Absolutely.
Oh boy, here's a big comment here. Let's read this. Back when there were only 6 teams, you had 2 rounds. You only needed 8 wins. Octopus has 8 legs or tentacles. One was thrown on the ice in a game 1 year, and Detroit swept both rounds 4-0. Finished 8-0 and won a championship. Many felt that the octopus throne was the reason they won, like a good luck charm, thus creating the legend to throw them on the ice when Detroit is in playoff games. So yeah, that's basically what you were saying, Tim. You kind of hit the nail on the head with that one for sure. But I mean, it makes sense. And you know what hockey fans are like with their superstitions for sure.
But back to Getzlaf, I don't think him going to Pittsburgh would put Pittsburgh like over the edge to be a contender. You know, I think Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
How much is Getzlaf gonna help Pittsburgh? You know.
Yeah.
So there's a comment that I want to bring up right now, and sorry, I was eating because I'm fat. Realistically, and this goes for all sports, not just the NHL. It's a good question to ask, and our friend Patrick has already answered it in the comments. But Heather, are we going to see fans at all this season, or will it be next season? Now, I know the realistic answer across all sports because I'm following this very closely, but I want to hear from you two on specifically the NHL right now.
Well, I know for a fact that the NHL has come out and they said, obviously, if they can get fans in arenas, they will do that because, you know, obviously ticket sales and everything creates revenue. But there's also a lot of, you know, counties where these teams play that are banning indoor gatherings. So in those counties, I don't see fans happening. But in those counties, or even in Canada, where you're still allowed up to 25% capacity in indoor arenas, I think the NHL will take advantage of that and try to fill up the arena as full as they can with fans in places that allow it.
All right, Shane, you're close, but you're forgetting one key piece to all of this. Let's see if Tim knows it. Tim, what do you think?
I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon.
Oh, all right. You both don't know. All right. Then I'm gonna learn you guys some knowledge right now. And this is just because I've learned this in other sports already. So the NHL is gonna do the exact same thing. Guys. I love being dramatic. It's fun. The COVID-19 vaccine has just started being brought out and I don't care what you think about the vaccine itself. The reality is that we finally have a vaccine. The MLB is waiting to start their season so that all their players can get vaccinated. And if we're talking about that time frame, we're looking at April, May, June. That general time frame when now the general population gets to get the vaccine in America. I don't know what you guys in Canada are doing, and quite frankly, I don't care. But in America, April, May, June is realistically when the general population, this includes the NFL. The NFL is not getting a free pass for their playoffs. The MLB, the NHL, the NBA. The general population gets the vaccine in that time frame. These first doses are going to frontline workers. They deserve it. They should have it. Let them have it. The second doses are going to go to the next tier of frontline workers. And then we're getting the sports players, the FedEx drivers, I don't know what Tim does for work, but I think he's in construction. So construction guys, all of them can then get the vaccine. Once that vaccine is at about 75% of the population, the world can go back to normal. We can go to concerts. We can go to live events. We can do all that, the things we used to do, such as go to a hockey game.
That is kind of like you guys down in the States are doing it kind of the same as what we're doing up here. I know the vaccine just arrived in each province up in Canada here, and the RNs or nurses were the first to get it. So there's nurses, front of the line nurses that work with COVID-19 patients. Some of them have already got vaccines, but the government's in progress with getting these nurses all vaccinated. And then they're starting with people 80 and older. And then they're doing 79 to 71, and they're doing 70 to 61, and all the way down. So, I mean, I'm 25. I probably won't be looking at a vaccine till April, May, June anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is going to sound terrible, but, like, what good does the vaccine do to someone that's, like, on their way out? You know?
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, though, guys, get your vaccine because I want this whole pandemic to be over with. I'm sick of it. But yeah, that's just it. Like anything right now to just get this whole thing done so I can go out and go to hockey games and go places without having to worry about social distancing, wearing a mask. Not that I'm wearing a mask is bad because I do follow the rules and everything. But just so I can go out and return to my normal life and go back to how things were pre-COVID. Like I just want anything. If that involves getting a vaccine, if that involves, you know, socially distancing and wearing a mask for 3-4 months, I'm all for it. As long as this whole thing can be done so that I can go to hockey games again, I can live my life how I was living my life before, then that's all that I really want right now.
Yeah.
And I saw Sandra and Heather agree too, so that's good. But yeah, so guys, get your vaccine. I can't stress that enough. But this isn't hockey related anymore. This is more this is more society talking here. But so going back to the NHL, I think we got a few more minutes here before James pops on, which I'm super excited about. But going back to the NHL, we're gonna answer this question first. What do you think is on the top to go? What do you think is on the top to go Stanley Cup for this upcoming season? Not sure really what you mean there, Sandra.
Like,
unless you
your favorite to win the cup.
I mean, Shane, all you had to do was read that one correctly. It's who do you think is on the top? So top teams going to the Stanley
okay.
Cup.
I read that one wrong. Sorry.
Not what. Who?
What? Okay, perfect. There we go. Thank you. Honestly, I think Colorado is up there.
Yeah, I'd say Vegas is like holding on. Tampa, I think, will be back.
Toronto's got a stacked team. They're still not going to get out of the first round, so I'm not even going to count them.
Boston, just from my bets, I'm praying, but who knows?
Yeah, I want to say Edmonton, but who knows? The Oilers let me down every single year. Oilers are going to be my pallbearer at my wedding so that they can let me down one, or at my funeral so that they can let me down one last time.
Honestly, Dallas will. Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas hasn't really they haven't really left or released or got rid of a whole bunch of players. So Dallas could be up there. Another team that could surprise everyone is Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Philadelphia could be top 4 or 5 in the league. Heather says Boston. Sandra wants Pittsburgh. I want to talk about Pittsburgh for a bit. I think Pittsburgh's like glory years where they
Done.
won those 3 cups in 6 years or 7 years, whatever it was, they're done. Crosby
Yeah.
and Malkin they're still good players, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the same weapons they did those years they won the cup. I don't see Pittsburgh. I see them maybe squeaking into the playoffs. I don't see them going very far in the playoffs. I think kind of Pittsburgh's going to be more on their decline now, the older that Crosby and Malkin get.
And the big thing now is, what do the playoffs look like for this upcoming season? How many teams from each division are going? Are they doing it division based? Are they doing it conference based? You know, like there's a lot of things that are yet to be answered, and those are key factors. Because if we go with that division of Pittsburgh, Washington, Philly, the Rangers, Islanders, Devils, Buffalo, and Boston, and you only want 3 teams from one division going to the playoffs. That's going to be a hard division to be in that top 3.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to talk about like what do you think the hardest division is going to be?
Well, Shane, that's going to have to wait because our special guest is here. So if you want to do a quick intro and then I'll bring him in, go ahead.
We'll talk about this real quick before we bring James on. What do you think, Tim, is going to be the hardest division in the NHL? Presuming that these divisions stay the same, where you have the Canadian division and then the divisions in the U.S., what do you think will be the hardest one to win?
Probably that Canadian, because Toronto, I feel, is going to be the favorite in that division, and then the one with all the Metro teams in Buffalo and Boston. That division is just stacked with contenders.
Right. Yeah, I gotta agree there. Like, you got Canadian division, you've got Toronto, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, who are all very elite teams, very much capable of taking that first spot in the division. But it's definitely, if that Canadian division goes, something that I'm more than excited to see, because that just means more Battle of Albertas for me. Everyone loves a good old-fashioned Battle of Alberta, especially me, so as an Oilers fan. But, guys, it is about that time now. We've got a very special guest on our show tonight, Mr. James Duthie from TSN, who will be talking with us about his brand new book and more about kind of what brought him into broadcasting, his broadcasting career, and more or less what's going to be happening with the World Juniors and the NHL this year. So we will let Jake bring him up. Mr. James Duthie, everybody.
How you doing, boys?
Good. How are you doing? Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you getting back to us and coming onto our show. I know you're busy with your family today, so we'll try to keep this short. But I just want to start by saying, James, that book that you released, this one right here, guys, for those that are watching, Beauties by James Duthie. This is probably one of the best sports books I've read in my life.
Oh, thank you for saying that, man. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to write. I wanted to write the kind of book that I would read, right? I'm not a huge reader. My wife always jokes that I've written more books than I've read. But I wanted a book that was just, somebody told me it was toilet reading the other day, because you could sit down and read one chapter on the can and then come back to it later. But I just wanted great stories and nothing else, basically. That's what I told the guys, is tell me great stories, and that's all I want to put in this book. I don't care what they are, short, long, what they're about, as long as they're somewhat hockey related.
That foreword by Roberto Luongo, that's the first time I've ever rolled on the floor laughing at a book before. That was probably the best story I've ever heard. I'm not going to tell you guys the story. Listening, you got to have to go out and buy the book and read it. But that was absolutely great. I guess I wanted to start, James, by asking what kind of gave you this inspiration. Like, you just, obviously, I know you've released multiple books in the past, but you just were you just like at work, driving to work one day and was like, I want to make a book about NHL players' stories, or how'd you get that inspiration?
Yeah, I don't know that there was one, sort of bell moment. I think that I've spent 18 years now on that panel, and I've had so many guys beside me, not just the guys you see regularly, the Bob McKenzies and Jeff O'Neills and Jamie McLennans and Dave Poulins, but we've had so many guests and, Hall of Fame guys in the studio, coaches between jobs like Torts and McTavish and Peter Laviolette and Maurice. And the
Right.
one common thing I think you find with all hockey guys is they all have stories, right? I
Right.
mean, I really truly think, and maybe I'm biased as you guys would be, but I think hockey lends itself to stories better than any other sport. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just the dressing rooms and the camaraderie and the road trips and the fact that guys go out, or at least in the old days used to, but it just, everybody in hockey's got at least a couple of great stories. And that was kind of my thesis going in, is that no matter who I contacted, that they would have at least one great story, and it kind of proved to be true. And I really wanted to go, there's a lot of old timer stories, but I wanted to get current players, because guys like
Right.
McDavid and Crosby and Austin Matthews and so on, they kind of get the reputation of having no personality because their interviews aren't that exciting. But
Right.
I think when you get guys away from, asking them, hey, what went wrong with the power play in the second period? If you get them comfortable and casual away from the rink, and you can say, hey, tell me about something, and they trust you enough, and I'm thankful that they trusted me, that they all do have great stories. And Sid, for example, he would send me voice memos, and every 2 weeks up in my phone would pop up this voice memo from Sid telling me another story, and he told me about 10. So I think I proved my thesis correct, that all these guys have, just some awesome stories.
James, you probably have one of the coolest jobs in the world. Like, I am completely jealous of you. I watch you on TSN all the time, and everything. And I just get, like, one of the things that I've always wanted to do is either be a professional athlete or be a professional broadcaster. And, just watching guys like you and Bob McKenzie and O-Dog and everything on TSN, it just, it makes me want to follow my dream that much more. So I guess that being said, that's my story. What kind of led you to pursue this as a career? Something you wanted to do your whole life, or what kind of strung you along that whole path?
I don't think I was any different from you. I think all of us on this call probably at some point in time wanted to be professional athlete. For me, it was a football player, because I was never great at hockey. I lived in Victoria till I was 8. So when I moved to Ottawa, I didn't know how to skate. And I was so far behind everybody. And I made rep when I was 14. And but it took me that long to catch up. And so I knew pretty early I was never going to be a pro hockey player. So I thought I would be a football player. And I was so delusional. Like, I thought right through high school, I thought I was going to play for the Niners. Like, I really believed that. And then it was like grade 13, I realized, okay, I was recruited by McGill. I was going to go play football at McGill. And I was a decent high school football player, but, I was like 5'10", 150 pounds, like wet. And I played cornerback, and I'm like, what? How many of those are in the NFL? And so I kind of went to my next best. I said, okay, what could I do next? I love sports. It's all my life. I have to do something. And so broadcasting was kind of the next best thing. And I think I'd probably done it when I was younger. You guys have probably done this, right? When you're 14, 15, you turn down the TV, you do your own play-by-play.
Yeah.
I definitely did that. Yeah. And not necessarily thinking that's what I wanted to do, but I guess it was at the back of my mind. And so I went to journalism school, and it took forever. I became a news reporter and covered murders, fires, and such. And it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I finally got to do sports and got hired by TSN. I'd done a little sports locally. So it took a long time to get there. But you're right. I do feel like incredibly lucky with everything I get to do and everything I get to cover.
For sure.
So I ask you one question about the book. As everybody knows, it's 50 stories from hockey players, coaches, general managers, broadcasters. How did people view you asking for stories? Were they kind of hesitant to tell you their stories, or did they just come out and they just have a list of stories, Because hockey's
that's a great question. Yeah, and I think that there was different levels. Most people, by the way, no problem. I used some agents and stuff to help convince guys. I think trust is the biggest thing, guys, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of negativity towards media, between media and players, and so on and so forth. Fortunately, I'm not one of those guys that it's not my job to carve guys. I'm a host, right? So I'll criticize guys on occasion, but it's not really my job. So I don't think that there's anybody out there that necessarily hates me. Probably some viewers don't like me, but there's not many players that do. And I have somebody like Sid. I don't pretend to be friends or anything. I'm not going to overblow our relationship, but I've interviewed him enough times over the years. Same with McDavid or Austin Matthews or whoever that may be. And I guess there's enough trust built up that they knew I wouldn't screw them, right? Because in the end, that's all it is. If you're going to do a book on somebody, you're going to write a chapter, they got to think I'm not going to get screwed by this guy. And I made it clear to everybody this was going to be a fun book, right? I wasn't out to get real dirt. I mean, there's some good juicy stories in there, but nobody. There's nothing that's going to make anybody sue me, I don't think. So that was a big part of it. So I didn't really have any. There was a few people reluctant at first that I kind of had to talk to and talk into it. And guys like Wayne Gretzky. My biggest challenge, Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, how do you get a story from them that hasn't been told in a book before? Because there's been about 100 books written about these guys, but both of them were able to come up with something that had never been told before. And so that's the other thing I wanted. I wanted fresh stories, right? There might be a few stories in this book you might have heard somewhere, but for the most part, I think, most people who read this will not have heard these stories before, and that's what I like. That's what I like when I open a book, right?
Yeah, and the story, like the book itself has stories of everything. There's some funny, there's serious, there's emotional stories, there's everything. And it's everything that you can, like, growing up, like me and Tim are both hockey players. Growing up, that's all we played. But as a hockey player, like myself especially, and Tim as well, we can just like relate to everything that goes on in that book. But the locker room atmosphere, the chirping on the ice and everything. So yeah, it's definitely a great book. I had a hell of a time reading it. It was so much fun to read. I'm gonna we got about 10 minutes left before we let you go here, James. But I just kind of want to ask, were you in the NHL bubble when the playoffs happened?
No, I was not. Because we lost, we don't have the national rights anymore here. Rogers does, so it was only the Rogers and NBC people that were in there. I'm going to the World Junior bubble in a couple of minutes, but I was like all of you. We were in studio. We would do like pregame and postgame on SportsCenter. But no, I was not in the bubble. So the World Junior bubble experience will be my first.
Yeah. So what are you expecting? Like, I know obviously, like, you're going to be in a bubble till middle or beginning of January. So it's got to be hard leaving your wife and kids for that long. What are you kind of expecting and everything like that with the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I'm bummed about Christmas. This will be the first, because of World Juniors. I've had to leave quickly on Christmas a lot, but I've always sort of been around. My kids are older now, so that's okay. But it is a bit of a bummer to leave them on December 19th. But once we get past Christmas, what's everybody doing anyway, right? We're watching the World Juniors, so I got to go. I fly Saturday. I have to go into the hotel room and stay in the actual hotel room for 4 days. I can't leave. I can't even go out in the hall. And apparently they give you like an ankle bracelet, like you're under house arrest, right? So they know exactly where you are. So if you try to go down to the lobby or something, some SWAT team's going to emerge from the friggin' stairwell and tackle me and pin me down and put me in solitary. So we do that for 4 days, and then it's pretty tight restrictions. Like, I'll basically be going between my hotel and the rink where Bob and I do the panel stuff during the games, and that'll be it. But truly, guys, beyond missing my family, I can't wait, because I think that we really need this World Juniors. It's such a tough winter ahead for everybody. Everybody's locked inside. The NHL hasn't started, and in many ways, even though the crowd's not going to be there, I think this will be in some ways the most needed World Juniors ever, right? Because we need that hockey fix.
I'm just looking forward to hockey. Like I said, like, it's December 17th today. Normally in a perfect world, we're 2.5 months into the NHL season, right? So especially with no hockey, like, I'm definitely missing hockey. But that's another thing that we kind of wanted to ask you about, was about the NHL. Like, January 13th with a 56 game schedule is kind of what we're hearing. Are you kind of hearing the same thing? Or what are your updates on the NHL, if you have any?
Yeah, I pretend to be Drager or McKenzie or LeBrun or Friedman or those guys and the insiders. I let them do the work on that. I think the 13th just seems harder and harder every day, even though the NHL is holding to that right now. The logistics of getting it done before then, when we don't even have a plan yet. And, the news came out today. I don't know if you guys saw it, that there's a lot of concern right now, and I heard you guys talking about the All-Canadian division before I came on, which I think would be awesome. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of concern right now that they can't figure out. The provincial requirements in Canada are tougher than states,
Yeah.
which is a good thing for Canadians probably. But it may be too hard for them to figure out how to get these teams traveling interprovincially. And so there is a possibility that all the Canadian teams are going to have to go in the States and all the hockey is going to be played in the U.S. And that's the first time that was sort of tossed about today, which would be really too bad, because it looked like that Canadian division was going to be a thing, and that would have been a lot of fun, at least for one season. So, but
Right.
anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen, I think the NHL, they have about 20 different scenarios that they're going over every day, and they just can't. It's really, I feel sympathy for them because it's a tough thing to figure out. San Jose can't play in their building. Montreal is not sure, but there's other teams that have uncertainty. How do you make a sked? You don't know if everybody can be in their buildings. The idea of doing bubbles or multiple bubbles or hub cities is still challenging at this time. And do you do that for a month? Do you do that for 2 months? Is that fair to the players? I just think the logistics on this, they're harder than even the summer bubble, right? At least the summer bubble, you knew, okay, we're going to have 2 bubbles, whether the cities are, and we'll figure out. Now you're like, do we have 4 bubbles? It's so complicated. And thus, I think January 13th is a pipe dream. The 20th, the 25th, the 27th, maybe 48 games instead of 54 or 56 or 52 or whatever the numbers being thrown around might be more realistic. And I'd take that. I think hockey fans, if they could get in 48 games like they did in the last lockout, there's no asterisk besides the Chicago Blackhawks, right, when they won that. So I hope they can figure out the Canadian requirements to have that Canadian division.
Yeah, for sure. Before we let you go here, James, I think Tim had one last question for you, something about the Maple Leafs. Am I right, Tim?
Yeah. So TSN and all of Canada loves to cover the Maple Leafs. What are your thoughts on Toronto and their moves this offseason? And do you think they'll finally be able to get past the first round?
Was that like a veiled Toronto Sports Network comment? No, we get that a lot, and there's good reason, because the Leafs do get more than enough coverage. And I'm not from Toronto, and I'm always fighting for equal coverage for all 7 Canadian teams, but I know they are a popular hockey team. I do think they got a lot better. It's hard to tell. I mean, everybody loves the Thornton and Wayne Simmons and guys like that. I'm always leery. Like, we fall in love with guys' reputations, and the game's so quick now. Can they still keep up? And they certainly have things that the Leafs were lacking. And so, if they can just play bit roles, then I think those are great acquisitions. And certainly Brody's an upgrade. If that's Morgan Riley's deep partner. So I think they're definitely better and more suited for the playoffs. But I think there's a lot of question marks. I don't think you just, they got Joe Thornton now, and they got Wayne Simmons, and everybody's remembering these guys in their primes, and they're not those guys anymore.
Yeah, Thornton's
right?
like 40 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, still a useful guy in the right role. And, even Wayne sort of has bounced around the last few years and has had trouble in the stops. He'll be highly motivated to play in his hometown. And like you said, he adds some grit and grind that they don't have. So I like most of the stuff they've done, but I would caution Leaf fans who tend to get overexcited sometimes to, not look at Wayne Simmons 5 years ago and Joe Thornton 8 years ago and think that that's what's going to happen this year with the team.
Yeah.
So I agree. Picking the Canadian division, I heard you guys just before I came on, those 6 teams, man, you could make arguments for all 6 of them winning and all 6 of them coming 4th or 5th in that division. I think Toronto will be in the top 2 or 3, but I think Austin Matthews is just going to be an absolute
monster.
An absolute stallion horse monster this year.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, he likes to wear the short shorts in those Instagram posts. But those legs are just freaking massive, right?
Thighs bigger than my head.
Oh yeah. So he could dominate the league and have kind of a hard season over 48 games. I think he has that possibility.
Right.
So I think they'll be fun to watch, but honestly, until you've done something, until you've won a couple of rounds, it's hard to say, wow, this team's a Stanley Cup favorite or something.
Right. Well, James, I think that's all the time we have today. So thank you so much for coming on. You go have Christmas with your family and have safe travels on Saturday, man. And I look forward to watching you on the World Juniors this Christmas for sure.
I really appreciate you guys having me on, and sorry I had to cut it short. Yeah, it's kind of a
That's
Christmas
fine.
night with my family, but all the best to you guys. Always love talking to good hockey fans, and take it easy, enjoy the World Juniors, and enjoy the NHL when it gets going.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, James. Take care.
Thanks, boys.
All right. Well, there you have it, James Duthie. I'm still kind of vibrating. That was kind of the most famous person I've ever talked to.
I'm just saying, you could easily see Shane quietly fanboying. It was hilarious.
Yeah, I'm kind of sweating here. I got to take my hat off and wipe the sweat off my hand because I don't want to. Talking to a guy like that, I don't want to screw up, right? So, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Inside the Ice. I believe we have Hunter and Elizabeth coming up right away here with Behind the Basket.
We do not. Behind the Basket has been pushed back to Sunday at 8 p.m.
Oh, okay. Well, there you have it. Behind the Basket's pushed back.
That's why I'm here.
All right. Well, that's all that we have for the show tonight, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with James Duthie, and you guys have a Merry Christmas. I'm not sure if we're going to be, Tim, are we going to be going live Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve?
No.
No. Okay, good. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Real quick before I press end, neither one of you leave right away this time. Let's have an actual conversation after this ends.
All right. Well, we will see you guys in the new year. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in January. And have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you.